A really fascinating motivational narrative about a young guy named Samuel. Now, Samuel is a 22-year-old carpenter. He's pretty broke, but the guy is just exceptionally talented. And more importantly, he has this absolutely massive dream. He doesn't just want to build chairs and tables forever. He wants to build entire, beautiful homes for everyday people. So today, we're going to break down exactly how he manages to bridge that gigantic gap between his current reality and that ultimate vision.
Okay, let's dive right in and deconstruct Samuel's journey. We're going to use a 5-part blueprint based on the actual stages of construction. 1. Laying the foundation. 2. Finding the right tools. 3. The integrity test. 4. Weathering the storm. And finally, 5. Building a lasting legacy.
All right, starting off with phase 1, laying the foundation.
You know, before you can build a whole city, you really have to figure out how to shape a single piece of wood. So our story kicks off with Samuel in his little dusty workshop, painstakingly carving a wooden chair by hand. People admire his work, sure, but there's a catch. A lot of them flat out refuse to pay a fair price because, well, they say, it's just a chair. But this perfectly illustrates the concept of vision. Where the villagers see this simple, isolated object, Samuel sees a stepping stone. He just smiles and tells them that one day he'll build more than chairs. That right there, that's the foundational mindset we're talking about today.
And that mindset doesn't just clock out when the workday ends. Samuel spends his mornings crafting furniture, but his evenings, he's poring over old architecture books and sketching out house designs. His best friend Ben, who's a hilarious, fiercely loyal guy, actually catches him doing this and asks a pretty logical question. "You're a carpenter. Why are you drawing cities?" Samuel's response is just perfect. He doesn't get defensive, he just smiles and says, because every city begins with one builder. He is completely unshakable. He knows for a fact that his current job title doesn't dictate his future impact.
Moving right along to phase 2, finding the right tools. So raw ambition is great, but actually scaling a dream requires structured learning. And yeah, it usually involves some growing pains too. Samuel decides to put himself out there and enters a house design competition. And he loses. Immediately, the village gossips start whispering that a carpenter could never cut it as a real architect. Samuel is understandably crushed. He's walking home feeling totally defeated. But his dad, Robert, who's this incredibly hardworking guy who deeply respects craftsmanship, steps in with some profound advice. He puts a hand on his son's shoulder and says, "They judged your result, not your potential." That is such a crucial takeaway. Early failures are literally just snapshots of where you are right now, not a permanent ceiling on where you're going to go.
And honestly, that potential doesn't stay hidden for very long. Enter Mrs. Carter. She's a famous architect who happens to stumble upon Samuel's designs, and she is instantly blown away. She tells him, "Talent builds houses, vision builds cities." It's a brilliant way of illustrating the gap between just being capable and actually having visionary scale. Samuel clearly had the talent to be an amazing carpenter, but he had the vision to be a city builder. Mrs. Carter recognizes this instantly and steps up to be his mentor.
Now, she doesn't just hand him a few inspirational quotes and send him on his way. She puts him through the ringer with a rigorous curriculum. We're talking modern architecture, business management, leadership, and sustainable construction. This is the real, actionable upskilling phase. Samuel is studying late into the night, absorbing all this intense new knowledge, all while keeping up his daily carpentry work just to pay the bills. He is literally pulling double shifts to drag that potential into reality.
Which brings us to phase 3, the integrity test.
Here's the thing about leveling up. Once you get those new skills, the real world is absolutely going to stress test your morals. Samuel gets a business proposition from this greedy construction mogul named Mr. Blake, whose entire playbook is just maximizing short-term profit. Mr. Blake tells Samuel to just use cheap materials because nobody will notice. But Samuel, who is totally grounded by the values his dad taught him and the sustainable practices from Mrs. Carter, just calmly shuts him down. He says, "I want buildings that protect families, not buildings that create danger." Mr. Blake storms out in a rage, but for Samuel, this moment forever cements his uncompromising commitment to safety and quality.
So, after turning down the quick, easy money, Samuel has to do it the hard way. He scrapes together every penny he has and launches his own tiny construction company. The very first project is a modest family home, and it definitely has some hiccups. His buddy Ben is helping out, and he accidentally paints the brand new front door completely shut. It's this hilarious tension-breaking moment, and Ben just shrugs and jokes, well, at least no thieves can get in. Everybody cracks up. But more importantly, the family absolutely falls in love with their beautiful, well-crafted new home. And because the quality is just undeniable, word starts to spread.
All right, on to Phase 4, weathering the storm.
Because, as you know, success always attracts attention. As Samuel's reputation grows, an unscrupulous, massive competitor decides to play dirty. They literally start copying Samuel's architectural designs just to poach his clients. And honestly, for a minute, it actually works. Customers start jumping ship, and Samuel's team is understandably freaking out about the future of their little company. But Samuel just looks at his worried employees, gives them a reassuring smile and says, they can copy our designs, they can't copy our values. He gets that a blueprint is literally just lines on paper, but executing it, that takes soul. So rather than getting sucked into a race to the bottom, Samuel and his team double down on what actually makes them special. They become relentlessly focused on 3 uncopyable steps: uncompromising quality, strict honesty, and total customer satisfaction. The logic here is bulletproof. The competitor might have the same shapes printed on a page, but they do not have Samuel's work ethic or his integrity. And sure enough, by sticking to their guns, those lost customers quickly realize the difference in quality and come right back to Samuel.
And finally, Phase 5, building a lasting legacy.
So let's look at how all of this compounds over a lifetime. The guy started out hand-carving chairs in a dusty shop, putting up with villagers making fun of him. Then came the brutal nights of studying. Then, risking it all on a tiny startup. Decades later, all those small, honest decisions have snowballed. Samuel is now the owner of one of the biggest construction empires in the entire country. The physical growth of his business perfectly mirrors the internal growth of his character.
And eventually, the public catches on to what Samuel saw the whole time. A major magazine drops a huge headline, "Poor Carpenter builds dream city." Talk about the ultimate public validation, right? The exact same people who used to whisper that a carpenter could never be an architect are now reading all about the cities he built completely from scratch.
But I love what happens when a reporter asks him what his inspiration was for all of this. His answer is just incredibly grounding. He smiles and simply says, "I never stopped building, even when nobody noticed." That is such a crucial takeaway. Success in the spotlight is almost entirely dependent on your consistency in the shadows. All those lonely nights reading old architecture books while the village was asleep, that was the actual foundation of his dream city.
But for Samuel, a true legacy isn't about hoarding wealth or landing on magazine covers. It's about getting back to his roots. He takes his massive resources and pours them right back into the community, building affordable homes, schools, and hospitals for underprivileged neighborhoods. He makes absolutely sure that families who are exactly where he used to be finally have a safe, beautiful place to live and grow.
And getting to watch all of this unfold is his dad, Robert. The very man who told him all those years ago that one failure didn't define his potential. Robert watches his son changing the community and tells him, "You build houses, then you build hope." It's just an incredibly emotional realization that perfectly wraps up the moral arc of Samuel's life, from that tiny workshop to making a massive citywide impact.
In the closing moments of our source material, Samuel takes a walk back to his old original workshop. There's a young kid there, a new carpenter, who looks up at him and asks, "Can someone like me build something great?" Samuel just hands the kid a small piece of wood and tells him that every single great city begins with one small piece and one really big dream. As the story reminds us, great dreams are built one step, one brick, and one honest decision at a time. It's proof that taking small skills and pairing them with absolute honesty can create something legendary.
Samuel didn't build a city overnight. He did it chair by chair, sketch by sketch, and honest deal by honest deal. The blueprint for success is sitting right there. So as you look at your own goals, your daily grind, and the small pieces of wood in your own life, I want to leave you with one question to think about. What are you building today?